In 1970, a city of 2 million people began to die, not from war, not from famine, not from disease. The buildings were standing, the jobs still existed, the food was on the shelves, but something invisible had collapsed, and nobody noticed until it was already over. This is the story of what actually kills a society, and it is not what you think. In the late 1960s, a sociologist named Philip Zimbardo ran a now famous test. He parked two identical cars in two different cities, one in the Bronx, New York, one in Palo Alto, California. Both had their hoods propped open. Both had their license plates removed. Then he walked away and watched what happened. In the Bronx, the first person arrived within 10 minutes and took the battery. Within 24 hours, everything of value was gone. Within 3 days, strangers were smashing windows for no reason at all. In Palo Alto, the car sat untouched for a week. Then Zimbardo himself walked up and smashed a window with a sledgehammer. Within hours, passers-by, ordinary people, not criminals, began destroying it too. It was not poverty that made the difference. It was not crime rates. It was one thing: the signal that nobody was responsible for this place anymore. Two researchers named James Wilson and George Kelling looked at this and asked a bigger question. They had been studying neighborhood decline for years. Not just break-ins and muggings, but something harder to measure. Why do people stop caring about a place? Why do some communities pull together under pressure while others unravel even when nothing dramatically bad has happened? They found the same pattern in city after city. It never started with crime. It always started with something smaller. A broken window left unrepaired. Graffiti that nobody cleaned up. A vacant lot that nobody maintained. Each small signal said the same thing to everyone who saw it. The social contract here is already broken. Someone else already opted out. You do not have to stay either. And once enough people received that signal, they acted on it. They stopped intervening when they saw something wrong. They stopped talking to neighbors. They stopped feeling like their behavior inside this place actually mattered. They became, in the language of the research, functionally absent, still physically present, already gone. But Wilson and Kelling's broken windows theory only explained the surface. The deeper question was why the signal of disorder spread so fast and hit so hard. A different researcher named Robert Sampson spent 30 years inside Chicago neighborhoods trying to answer that what he found was not about windows at all. The neighborhoods that resisted collapse were not necessarily the wealthiest. They were the ones with what he called collective efficacy, the shared belief among residents that they had both the right and the responsibility to act, the belief that their role in this place was real, that it carried weight, that if they did not do something, it was their failure, not just a fact of the environment. The neighborhoods that collapsed fastest were not the poorest either. They were the ones where that belief had already died, where people had learned correctly based on experience that nothing they did inside this system changed anything. Their role had been quietly taken from them by policy, by neglect, by 1,000 small signals that said, this place is not yours to protect. When a person's role in their community disappears, not because they left, but because the structure stopped needing them, something in them stops functioning. The body stays, the participation ends. By the 1980s, something new had appeared in the data that nobody had predicted. A generation was coming of age in these neighborhoods, and a significant portion of them were doing something researchers had never quite documented before. They were not joining gangs, they were not committing crimes, they were not failing in the ways the system had been designed to catch and measure. They were simply withdrawing. They stayed inside. They kept to themselves. They were by all external measures calm, well presented, not visibly troubled, but they were not building anything either. Not relationships, not futures, not communities. They had grown up watching adults try and fail to hold things together, and they had concluded quietly and entirely rationally that participation was a trap, that effort led nowhere, that the only safe move was to stop engaging with the structure entirely. They were healthy, they were present, they were already extinct as social beings. The researchers did not have a name for them. Calhoun, 20 years earlier, had called them the beautiful ones. The easy reading of all this is that people are weak, that comfort breeds apathy, that ease destroys character, but that is not what the data says. Sampson followed his Chicago neighborhoods for 3 decades. Through recessions and booms, through policy changes and demographic shifts, the single strongest predictor of whether a neighborhood would recover or collapse was not income. It was not policing. It was one question: do the people here believe that what they do matters? Poverty alone did not kill communities. Abundance alone did not kill them either. What killed them every time without exception was the removal of meaningful roles, the sense that the place had already filled every position it had available, and that there was nothing left for you to do that would actually count. Once that belief took hold, everything else followed. The windows broke, the cars burned, the beautiful ones withdrew, and the structure still standing still, funded still technically operational, quietly ceased to function. Sampson was not a doomer either. He spent 30 years in those neighborhoods, not to document the collapse, but to understand what held. And what held, wherever it held, was the same thing every time. Not more resources, not stricter enforcement. Roles that were real visible and filled by ordinary people who could see the effect of their own participation. A block association that actually made decisions. A school council where parents had genuine authority. A community garden that produced real food, that real people ate. Small things, unglamorous things, things that looked from the outside like they could not possibly matter at the scale of a city, but they mattered because they answered the question that once it goes unanswered, long enough ends everything. Is there still something here that needs me? The car Zimbardo parked in Palo Alto sat untouched for a week, until the moment it was clear nobody owned responsibility for it. Then it took less than an hour. Nothing about the car had changed. Nothing about the people walking past had changed. The only thing that changed was the signal about whether anyone's role in this place was still real. A city, like a colony of mice in a sealed paradise, does not die because the resources run out. It dies when the answer to that question becomes no. There is nothing here that needs you anymore. The beautiful ones are already walking among us. The question is whether we still have time to give them something worth doing.